Welcome, everyone, to the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network, where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville. My name is Kevin. I will be your captain. I'd like to introduce my crew for this week's episode. Union Federation, episode 205, Star Trek Lower Decks, season 5, the final season. Episode 8, Upper Decks. And, of course, with me is my first officer and counselor, and also founder of the BQN. I'd like to welcome Amy Nelson. How are ya?
Well, hello there. I'm doing great.
So yeah, we got Upper Decks going on here, Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. And of course, you got stuff going over the BQN. We'll catch you up on that soon. But of course, I'd like to welcome my co-captain here, security and weapons officer, co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network with me, of course, Mr. Kyle Wagner. What's going on, buddy?
Well, you can't do the podcast without me because really nothing happens when I'm not on the podcast.
Do we know about that for sure? Do we know?
It can't be possible, you know.
Well, we have been celebrating Lower Decks and all of its Easter eggs and canon connections and tributes to Trek of the past, and we've really been enjoying this final season here. We'll get more to that, of course. But we have some other stuff that's been happening on the Union Federation, of course, coming up in around the New Year's here, coming soon. We're going to have a limited 10-episode limited series celebrating USS Orville and its crew. We'll be discussing each member of the crew. And, of course, the first one we're going to be touching on is Lieutenant Alara Katan. We're excited for that. And for you TNG nerds out there, we just celebrated a wonderful limited run here where we discussed every Star Trek The Next Generation 2-part episode, which was a lot of fun to get back into. And so make sure you guys check that out. But, guys, I don't know if you know this, but we actually have some news. You know, before we started, I asked Amy, I'm like, Amy, did you hear about Section 31 trailer? She's like, oh, yes, I did. Well, Star Trek Section 31 premieres on January 24th exclusively on Paramount Plus. And this new original movie, Academy Award winner Michelle Yeoh reprises her Star Trek Discovery role as Emperor Philippa Georgiou, who joins a secret division of Starfleet tasked with protecting the United States of Planets. Excuse me, Union Federation of Planets. She must also face the sins of her past. And we actually had an interview with the director, of course, and some details. I'm going to have you see if you can help me pronounce the director here. Is it Olatunde Asasanami? Am I close?
Olatunde. I've got that down. But yes, the last name I don't know.
They were at a panel at WonderCon 2024 recently, diving more into it. And, of course, the movie brings back Michelle Yeoh, who appeared in the first 3 seasons of Discovery. Her last episode, Terra Firma Part 2, was shot in late 2019. And since that time, she's appeared in several TV series and films, including her Oscar-winning role in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Director also talked about her returning to Star Trek role of Emperor Georgiou, which began filming earlier this year. Quote, Michelle came in that very first scene and we shot it, and she's just like, it was like she had never left. It was incredible. Actually, that was literally what I told her. Wow, it feels like we just stopped filming with you yesterday. And so you know what happens in that very first scene. Oh, wait, I can't give that away. And they laugh. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on the trailer. Let's go ahead and start with you, Amy.
Yeah, I want to continue reading just before I give my thoughts, because we've got here, you have Yeoh has described it as Mission Impossible in space.
Yes.
And likened the tone to the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And I thought that was very interesting because she is very sharp-witted and her tongue can deliver like one-liners like no one's business. And so if there's going to be some levity and that, quick with the tongue, I am super excited. We don't really have anything like a Deadpool or a Guardians of the Galaxy in our universe. So yeah. I'm really excited. Now, when I saw the trailer, oh my goodness, I loved her in the bar. She's like Dame of the Bar. I'm Corks Bar on the station, Deep Space Nine. I don't know. I'm just that's where my brain went. And I feel like the preview trailer answered the question that I was most worried about. Like, how is this going to be in Star Trek? Like, how is it going to be in the Federation? And I feel like she is in bounds of the Federation, but yes, it's a Section 31, but sanctioned by the Federation. So I feel like it answered that question that I'm now even more excited to see, like how it's going to fit in.
Does it answer the question of when specifically this takes place?
No, I don't know the when.
Gotcha. Kyle, your thoughts on the trailer?
Well, she is our emperor. She is everything, everywhere, and all at once to all of us because she is the amazing Michelle Yeoh, who is, after so many years, truly getting her due from all the action cinema she did in overseas to what she's done here in the U.S. She is phenomenal, unique, and one of a kind. And I am so glad that they turned this from a series into a movie because I really think it lets them just go all out and lets her just be unleashed. And I think she's going to be unleashed in this film in every aspect that makes Michelle Yeoh great. And I'm hoping it does well enough that they will greenlight some future films if she is up for it. I think the big change, obviously, from and why this project kind of blew up even more is because she did win an Oscar finally, well-deserved Oscar, and brings more prestige to this project as well. And I think it's going to be something like we've never seen from Star Trek. We've seen hints of it here with Discovery. We've seen some of it maybe even with Strange New Worlds, but this is going to be just her unleashed like a storm upon the Star Trek universe, and it's going to be entertaining. It's going to be wonderful, and like you said, it's Mission Impossible in space, but you throw in some of that Guardians of the Galaxy fun aspect of it, and the quick lines and the quick one hitters. This is going to be something that Star Trek fans have really never truly gotten to experience in Star Trek, and I think it's going to be something that is going to be so different and give people a really good different look at what they can do with Star Trek.
Two things were coming to mind with this, and you kind of touched on it, Kyle, and I wanted to mention it, is that I believe this is the first Star Trek movie we're getting premiering on Paramount Plus, and the first Star Trek movie in a while, right, Amy?
Well, yeah, since Beyond.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious because this, I mean, I know there was rumblings that this was going to be a TV series. Then they moved it to a movie. So what I'm wondering if this is going to be kind of a possibility of maybe will they launch a TV series based on this movie or just kind of keep it as this movie? It'd be kind of curious to see what comes of it, and it's kind of exciting because I know we'll be covering it here, of course, on Union Federation. So that's gonna be interesting. But the other thing I was kind of curious about, one of my friends is a Star Trek fan. I remember he posted, I think when I shared the trailer or something, says it looks fun, but it doesn't look Star Trek yet. And he wasn't like negative about it. He was just kind of like he didn't get Star Trek vibes from it. Like there wasn't stuff in the trailer that kind of showcased, you know, you're in the Federation or whatever it is. The action looked great, but and I was kind of looking at it going, I could see your opinion of it. You know, if you didn't really know who Michelle Yeoh's character was, we know, you know, what she's done with Discovery and such. So that was really the only kind of like negative thing I've heard about it, but it wasn't done in a malicious way. It's just kind of like, you know, I need to feel like this movie is connected to Star Trek and the world around it, and I get that, and I'm sure we'll get that, of course, in the movie. We just got like a little snippet of it in the trailer, though. But Amy, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that actually goes to also what you put here in that article that you have in Variety. Section 31 screenwriter said, quote, "It was always my goal to deliver an entertaining experience that is true to the universe, but appeals to newcomers. I wanted a low barrier of entry so that anybody could enjoy it," end quote. So I think to your point and to your friend's point, like, this may not be big time Star Trek because we're getting that low barrier, like
Right.
anyone can watch it. So
Yeah. Kyle.
I think the aspect of that too is why that will work is because I think there's a lot of people who are kind of late to the Michelle Yeoh experience here, that maybe Everything Everywhere All at Once was really kind of their hopping on point. So to have this be something to where it could be a tool to bring new people in the Trek because of her as the draw, this could be really a tool to do that. And I think having it be kind of low hanging fruit as far as getting into the Trek universe is the right call for this show.
Yeah, it'll be interesting the impact that this has, but also I'm more excited just that we're getting a Star Trek movie exclusively on Paramount Plus, and it's gonna be kind of curious to see how that goes moving forward. So yeah. All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the show here. We're discussing episode 8 of Star Trek Lower Decks season 5, called Upper Decks. And of course, we are now in our first away mission here. And of course, spoiler warning, make sure you've seen the episode before you listen or continue watching with us. But I'm sure you already have. You guys are smart trekkers out there. So, yes, of course, a little spoiler alert there. And our episode review. And of course, we've got our Admiral's log. And of course, I always like to turn to Amy here. If you would love to go ahead and read our Admiral's log for Upper Decks, excuse me.
Lower decks, upper decks, yes. The senior officers of the Cerritos go about a typical day. Freeman has a full schedule attending performances and rituals to support crew members. Chief Engineer Billups deals with a crisis of cascading equipment failures. Ransom manages a team of squabbling ensigns wrangling a herd of bacoons, space creatures with cloaking capabilities, for inspection by a visiting ecologist. Ransom feigns incompetence to help the ensigns work together by redirecting their hostility towards himself instead of each other. Security Chief Shax meditates to deal with his trauma from the Cardassian occupation of his planet Bajor, imagining himself killing a mountain of Cardassians in his own younger self. Ta'ana, having been criticized for not providing enough painkillers to her patients, subjects herself to painful treatments to prove her point. When the ecologist reveals himself as the leader of a team of alien clicket aiming to use the bagoon's cloaking ability to dominate the galaxy, the crew fights back. Freeman remembers that clickets hate to be complimented and praises the attackers until they retreat. At the end of the day, Freeman's husband arrives on the Cerritos to celebrate their anniversary, having been invited by the captain's aide, Stevens.
All right, nicely done. Okay, let's get some first reactions to this episode. Let's go ahead and start with you, Kyle.
Well, Kevin, first of all, I just want to say how much I respect how you handle these podcasts. It's so
don't go there. No.
And Amy, you are just rocking the hair as always, and I just, it's phenomenal. Okay, that's how I'm gonna say.
By the way, did anyone get any flashbacks to when Wesley Crusher stands up to the bully alien because he had the webbed fingers or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, remember that one?
Yes.
Sorry.
Coming of age. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
So this episode was definitely not what I expected. I really thought was going to be more of maybe the lower decks crew maybe moving into the upper decks. I talked about this last week, but I think it's a good thing to do an episode like this to give the upper decks crew their chance to shine one time during this final season. I thought the separate stories were all very entertaining in different ways. And then kind of the overarching thing that happens with it was interesting as well. There's a few things with this though that I would have liked to have seen. Just because we did get both the Mariners' parents on the ship, I would have loved to have had a moment with the three of them, even if it was just a quick on-screen thing. I love Ransom. The Ransom story was great. Shax's story was solid. The doctor was good, but to me, I guess this should have been an episode that maybe came a little bit earlier in the season, not as we're getting closer to the final episodes. If this was like the third or fourth episode of the season of a 10-episode season, I would have been like, okay, I'm good with this. This is a weird place for this because we've got 3 episodes left basically after this, and there's a lot that they still need to cover in this. But just as a standalone episode, it was a very fun episode. I enjoyed it for what it was, and yeah, I'm just going to continue complimenting people or finding ways to do things that will cause extreme pain because I need to test everybody's pain tolerances before the podcast is over.
Amy, let me get your first reactions to the episode.
Yeah, this was I felt I expected this, like getting to see the, upper decks, and I really enjoyed Ransom was my favorite. Because he is a true leader. Those ensigns work together. They figured it out. He's the bad guy. I love it. So I like that creativity. And each of them were creative. Billups, hilarious, solving the cascading. And then at the very end, when it's like, oh, there's another problem. Let me help you. Okay, let's do this. I really enjoyed this episode. Yeah, it's good.
We're going to touch on Ransom's commanding later because I have an issue with it, and I'll explain that later. When I first watched this, I didn't really care for it, to be perfectly honest with you. I guess because I was missing the lower decks part, but I know why they did what they did. And I know that they had to give each of the upper decks kind of like their own little thing. I felt that, and I'm going to touch on those a little bit later, but I felt like some were executed better than others. I would have liked to have seen, like kind of like what you said, Kyle. I'd like to have seen a moment with the whole Freeman family at the end, and a little more tied to that. And I guess because it's they make a point in the beginning of the episode too, where to stay away from the upper decks because stuff's going down, but it would have been nice if the lower decks still were involved in some of the plot lines, kind of like what we saw with the original TNG lower decks episode, where you still saw them mix and mingle with the upper decks, especially like on the bridge or in sick bay and stuff like that, where I would have liked to have seen them actually intermingle with them, but still the upper decks taking the main story with us. That was the only thing I didn't care for. I wanted to, just so we could see how the lower decks do kind of respond to some of these situations that the upper decks are being highlighted for in this episode. I'll dive into that more a little bit later and stuff, but like I said, I did have a couple issues with this. It was still enjoyable, especially a lot of the throwbacks, and also let's go ahead and talk about some of the trivia. All right, Amy, why don't you get us going first here on the first trivia?
Yeah, well, the coffee cup that Shax uses is the same as those on Deep Space Nine.
All right. Kyle, read us the next two because they are related.
Oh, those cute little bagoon. One bagoon has a cattle tag in its ear. They referred to as cows by the crew. How dare they talk about these beautiful space creatures in such a way?
Space cows.
The bagoon are based on pill bugs. They can roll into balls when frightened and turn invisible, which kind of is really bad if you're trying to get out of the way when they start rolling.
Can we talk about how funny that scene was, though, when you just see them going in and out, phasing in and out, and like disappearing and hitting stuff? I thought that was pretty funny, actually.
The poor Joshua Tree shuttle.
Yeah, and then exactly, I like that little call out to the Joshua Tree shuttle. But also, too, you can see that there was a real reason why our villains of the episode really wanted to harness that power. So, yeah. All right, guys, this is something I thought was fascinating, and I didn't catch it at first. This was great. The bridge ceiling rocks get a partial canon explanation. They're also called the Cordry rocks, likely a reference to Marion Cordry, the longtime director of Star Trek brand management at CBS and director of the Star Trek Library and Archive. At the senior staff meeting, Lieutenant Commander Billups mentions refreshing the Cordry rocks in the ceiling panels from the bridge. Commander Ransom complains about them hitting him on the head each time the ship is damaged. This is likely a reference to the fact that rocks have sometimes been mysteriously seen as part of the debris on the bridge when the ship is damaged. And most notably example is the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise, when Captain Garrett is killed and some of the debris laying on the deck of the Enterprise Sea Bridge appears just to be rocks. as some of the debris of the bridge of the Enterprise D when Commander Riker is killed. Did you guys catch this at all at first?
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. No, I did not catch that at all.
I had to kind of do some digging for that. I don't know, but if you look at the picture I have here on YouTube, you can see the explosion when Garrett eventually dies. You see all these little rock particles everywhere. Apparently, they're up somewhere on the bridge, just waiting to be blown up. So yeah. Okay, we have got some Trek tropes, tributes, and canon connections. Kyle, why don't you hit the first one here for us?
Upper Decks joins the Next Generation's Lower Decks and Voyager's Good Shepherd as episodes that reverse the action, with the show's supporting characters taking a starring role and the main characters moving into the background.
There you go. All right. And we got some canon connections here. Amy, you want to hit the first one now?
Yeah, now Rutherford carves V'ger into his pumpkin from Star Trek The Motion Picture. The ship design was created for the movie, but was never fully seen on screen until the debut of the director's edition in 2001.
Yeah. This one I remember too. I just couldn't remember where I had seen the character, but the Starfleet ecologist, who's actually a Clicket in disguise, is a Gazarite, the same race as Federation President Jarish Inyo from DS9's Homefront and Paradise Lost. I recognize that outfit that he had. I'm like, I remember that guy. Kyle, what you got for us next?
I'm sorry, I was vision fighting, meditating. Shaft's vision fighting. What could be either his repressed rage from the occupation or an ancient Bajoran spirit freed from an exploded tablet takes place at the Battle of Tempasa. Tempasa was previously referenced in DS9 Ties of Blood and Water.
Yeah, there you go. Amy, why don't you hit the next one? I was excited about this one.
Winger Bingston references the experiences of Ro and Geordi in TNG's The Next Phase before talking about the experience serving on the Oberth class USS Manticore in X7 of Oberth year.
I was excited about this because the Next Phase episode is like in my top 10 TNG episodes of all time. I love that one. It's such a fun one. So yeah. And the next one I'll take here. This is Admiral Freeman appears to have the same taste in French cafes as Jean-Luc Picard. As a holodeck locale, he takes Carol for their anniversary. Looks to be like the cafe does from Artiste from Will Only Have Paris. So there you go. Nice little callback there. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So. All right. Kyle, why don't you hit the first observation lounge there that we have?
Okay, so does the opening scene of our Lower Decks carving pumpkins, in addition to Shax's spectral projection, mean that this counts as a Star Trek Halloween episode?
I was kind of hoping they would have had a lot more Halloween decorations or something.
I've got one thing to add to that, Kevin. I'm thinking the fertility episode might have been kind of horror movie-esque there, because that was really strange.
Can you clarify what you mean, Kyle?
And when one of the stops Freeman had with the fertility thing and all the stuff just explodes.
Yeah.
I think that could fall into that, especially considering we're going to be talking about another film on the Fandom Podcast Network involving things exploding and busting out of people.
That scene reminded me of Men in Black. Remember when it's giving birth the side of the road?
Right.
And that octopus baby, came. That's what my mind went to.
Amy, you want to hit the next observation lounge there?
Yeah, there's a lot for engineers to enjoy in this episode. In addition to the sick technobabble, there's also the lines, everybody dies, but it's the engineers who really get to live. And this is how all engineers want to go, at work, in a tube.
Referencing, of course, Star Trek, the original series, when Spock dies behind a tube, and then in Star Trek, the reboots, Chris Pine's captain dies in a tube, right?
Yep.
Radiation poisoning, I thought that was kind of funny. Nurse Westlake prepares hypersprays that inoculates the crew from a virus that makes everyone sing, does provide a perfect setup for a sequel to Subspace Rhapsody, and proves why we need a Lower Deck Season 6 more than ever.
Yes.
How fun would that be? All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into the next away mission. All right. So, as we like to do here, we like to give some shout out to Trek Core. And they have a nice article I put up here, and I'll start off with the first part saying, after last week's fully dilated home run, Star Trek Lower Decks continues the streak with the new best episode of the season that will likely land for me in the series' 10 best episodes overall. Upper Decks is a jam-packed love fest for Star Trek that gives Lower Decks its own Lower Decks, flipping the action from our main cast to the supporting characters of the show, who in this show are the Cerritos command crew. So that brings me to that first topic, guys. Lower Decks taking a backstage. Now we understand why. And I brought this kind of concern up earlier in this episode here, where in the original Lower Decks episode with TNG, we still got to see the regular Upper Decks mingle, sometimes one-on-one for the training purposes of the Lower Decks, but we didn't get that in this one. They made a specific point in this episode, like, nope, let's stay away, let's avoid the extra work. Freeman was like, no, Boimler, let's stay out of the way here. How did you feel about the Lower Decks taking the backstage, Kyle? Kyle, you're on mute.
Got busted this time. I think because we're doing the dichotomy of the fact we're going from Lower Decks to Upper Decks, where in the Next Generation episodes it was going from Upper Decks to Lower Decks, it made more sense to have the main bridge crew be part of that, at least with that. With Lower Decks, because you're putting the focus on the bridge, the higher bridge crew, you don't necessarily need to have any of the Upper Decks cast in there to be a part of it as much, because maybe they show them in the background. Like I said, I would have liked to have seen a moment between Mariner and both of her parents, since they were both on board the Cerritos. But I don't think it was quite as necessary as it would have been if you flipped it around, because I think there's enough stories to tell with the Upper Deck crew that it doesn't necessarily mean you need the Lower Deck crew with it. And I'm going to be honest with you, I thought the Lower Deck crew members that they showed, that ones we've never seen before, or maybe only in a quick appearance or something, it was interesting. They were just as interesting as what some of the stuff was they were doing with the Upper Decks crew. I love the ensign, the chief engineer was working with. I love the crew that our first officer was working with. It was a lot of fun, and I think it gave some other characters a chance to shine. Again, for me though, if you're going to have this type of episode, you should probably had it a couple episodes earlier in the final season.
Amy, what about you? Lower Decks taking the backstage.
Yeah, I really liked it. And I do agree with you, Kyle. I wish it was a little sooner. I mean, even TNG's Lower Decks was season 6. We still had season 7 to go. Right. This is the last season of Lower Decks, and now we're getting an episode like this. So I definitely agree with you on that. I feel like, as far as not seeing them, I mean, it was sort of cute. It felt like it was walking down memory lane of TNG, of like when we saw the recitals and the concerts. I'm like, oh yeah, do you remember that time when Data was playing with Keiko? And like, so I was actually okay, because I was just feeling like I was on the Enterprise D. That's where I was.
Gotcha. Yeah, like I said, my one concern is I would like to have seen the Lower Decks mingle with the Upper Decks, like we saw in the TNG episode. But I thought it was interesting, though, that and there, we'll get into more of the specifics that the Upper Decks did. But I'm glad that we opened up with the Lower Decks, and we got a shout out, of course, to Halloween. And it's just so funny that Boimler, I wish I was stuck in a painting, and just, funny stuff like that. And how Tendi seems to know more about the history of, customs on Earth than anyone else does. So I thought that was kind of a nice shout out there. But taking the main stage, of course, as we know, this, of course, episode is called Upper Decks. Now, when we knew that this was called Upper Decks, we were kind of probably expecting a different episode, guys. We were kind of maybe like, well, are we going to have some promotions for our Lower Decks? Well, not just yet. So that was one thing that kind of caught me off guard, though. But I felt that, as you guys have mentioned, this would have been an episode that would have been nicer to have earlier in the season. But there was a lot of nice call out and stuff. But it was nice to see the upper decks kind of get into their own rhythm and stuff like that. Was there anything from the upper decks, guys, that you wish you would have seen? Amy?
I guess I would have liked to have gotten more with Shax. I didn't understand what was happening. And my first thought was he's fighting with himself because remember he died? Remember the end of season 2, was it?
Yeah. Then he
And
came
then he
back.
came back. So I was like,
Not about that.
yeah, was he fighting like that? Because we just saw that with Discovery and the Dr. Culber and stuff. So, but then I was like, oh well, then the Cardassian and Bajor, right? The occupation. So I needed more with that because I just didn't understand what was happening. And it was difficult because it's such a difficult, heavy, weighty topic. And then to be having it against this comedy and we're going to be flippant that he's fighting himself. That was hard for me to get that connection.
That's a good point. I was reminded too, especially of this picture we have here on YouTube of when they're all putting their hands in for the high five after the meeting. I'm forgetting the character's name, but the Shaka when the Falls security guy or whatever it is, he didn't have a moment really in this episode. I was kind of hoping that would have been done. But Kyle, was there something that you wanted to see more from the upper decks?
I think they hit a lot. I kind of agree with Amy. The Shax stuff was so heavy, and really that could have been an episode on its own, and I would have been good with that because I think there was a lot more to it with that storyline than compared to the rest. But I think basically trying to do a little bit of an anthology episode, I think they gave everybody about as much time as they could, and I think for the most part they maximized it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. The next topic, I got to ask you guys about this. So, Ransom's approach to command. The article touches on this. The episode does right by my favorite of the bridge crew characters, Jack Ransom. On the face of it, Ransom has always been the most buffoonish of the bridge crew characters, addicting to workout, strutting his stuff around the Cerritos, very impressed with himself. But over the course of the show, whenever Ransom takes the spotlight, we get to see deeper into this character. We reveal that his workout and fall asleep routine as a way of promoting bonding between the ship's crew over a hapless commander was a funny one, and shows that while Ransom is definitely very out there, he's a true Starfleet officer at core. So I want to ask you guys about Ransom's approach to command, because I actually had a little issue with this. I get why he does it, okay? I get and I've heard this command approach before, have them bond while hating you, basically. Make you the bad guy, and that's exactly the approach that he did. But there's other ways to approach command that we have seen where command the respect of your lower deck, so to speak, but without this approach, in my opinion. Be the leader and lead, show how to lead, but show encouragement as well. And so I've never been a fan of the let's make the crew hate you so they bond, because it doesn't create a respect that I would like to see them have for Ransom. Now they walk away from this going, he's kind of a buffoon, and he took a nap when we needed him and stuff like that. And that does help with the comedic element of it. And I guess that's just the way that he does this, but I didn't like that approach. I'll be perfectly honest with you. But Amy, what do you think? Am I way off here?
Well, I wouldn't say way off, but I think you are missing the mark. This leadership style, yes, it does work. It is effective. It's not the most effective. And you're right. There are consequences that happen beyond later down the road that will have to be addressed, as in the level of respect that they're giving Ransom or the lack thereof. But for this part right now, it's the funniest of leadership styles, and it's the funniest of the way that he's making them gang up, let's hate Ransom because he tells boring stories. That's hilarious. I think it's so funny because it's lower decks and on the Cerritos, it's not going to be Enterprise D. It's not the flagship. Like, this is a way to motivate. And like, as a teacher, I have used that where like I've got kids to not like me and then they work together because I'm not helping them, right? Like, I can
Right.
be the bad guy. And I just thought it was super funny and I respected it because, yeah, you're not going to see a Riker or a Picard or really anyone because those are the flagships. But for this Cerritos second class type of ship, hilarious.
You know, what's funny is I saw it coming because they don't let you know, they don't telegraph it right away. But while the lower decks are starting to figure out what to do with the space cows and stuff like that, and he's still over there snoozing, you're like, he's not really snoozing, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Kyle, what do you think?
I think it's not the best way to thing. It's not the most effective way, but here's the thing: this is the way Ransom has been through most of the run of this. This is how he got Mariner's respect. He acted like a little bit of a buffoon, but we saw what the end game was with Mariner, and look how much he helped Mariner grow through this show. Also, too, let's remember he is first officer, but he's still a young first officer. He's got an arrogance to him. He thinks his way is the way. Much like Riker in early episodes of Next Generation, he has that bit of arrogance about him. He's just not as refined, but that's why you become a first officer. He obviously had there's something about him that makes, whether he sees it as, okay, I'm going to put everybody, make me as the bad guy so everybody works together, and that bonds them as a team. And then you are going to have people who figure that out, and that's what happens. But what he doesn't want to be the one that has to carry them. He wants them to be able to learn and grow from it, and that's his teaching method. Now, is it a great teaching method? No, but every teaching method is different. And I am sure if it would have been a situation where it got worse, where he needed to step up and get involved, he would have. He probably would have come in and saved the day, but he's kind of one. It comes across to me as kind of one of these teachers. You learn by doing, not by hearing it from me. And
Right.
that's, I mean, the method to do it is it's specifically a lower decks method. That's for sure. But it is proven to be an effective method, and it has been an effective method with several characters he's been involved with. It's even worked with him and Boimler at times in this run. So it's one of those things. You might not agree with it, but at least in the environment of the Cerritos, it's
That's an excellent point, Kyle, because even though I didn't agree with the approach to this command style, I found it very funny. it was great, and you made a good point. If you look back at how he has dealt with Boimler, he's actually, I think Boimler has, rubbed off from him, and so he's definitely been entertaining in the way that he does command, and he has had its moments. So yeah. Okay, let's bring us to the final topic here, guys. So, as you know, of course, upper decks were highlighted in this episode. What we learned from the upper deckers, and the article mentions that this episode has it all: alien invasion, space cows, engineering disasters, old Bajoran artifacts, one-man shows, fertility events, a sousaphone, and despite being absolutely chock full of great Star Trek content, following Captain Freeman, Commander Ransom, Lieutenant Shax, and Dr. Tiana, through individual stories of a day of their life on the Cerritos. The whole episode sings and never feels overcrowded. It's a gripping episode that gives a command crew who are often the setup persons or the butt of jokes for our main characters the chance to shine and be the main characters for a change. So my question for you guys is, of the side stories that we had for each of our upper deckers here, which upper decker was your favorite storyline in this episode? Amy?
Yeah, I like the Ransom. I feel like the most character growth was Dr. Tiana, though.
Yeah, expand on that one, because I was kind of like wondering. The reason why I'm asking Amy is because I thought it was kind of funny that like she got a review and someone complained saying, I didn't get enough anesthesiology or anesthetics or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I thought that was kind of funny that we got that kind of aspect to it. But I would not have guessed you would have said that. So please explain.
Well, I think, when anyone offers criticism, you're like, what? But then when you think about it, and I feel like she really did, go about it in her own way, going through the scientific method of, okay, I'm going to go run this experiment. My hypothesis is that my pain tolerance is good enough for everyone. So let me see. And then, she ran the experiment, which was hilarious. And she's like a super person, like superhero, because like you just can't kill her. Like, anyways, so her, yes, pain tolerance definitely needed to get checked, and she checked herself. She analyzed and then came out saying, "Yep," and is now gonna service her people who come to the medical bay. So,
Gotcha. Kyle, what about you, sir? Which Upper Decker was your favorite side story here?
I think the ransom and our chief engineer were the most fun, but I actually think the best one was our captain,
Yeah.
Captain Freeman, because
yeah,
I think it really showed how committed she is as a captain to her crew, going to these performances, being there for everybody who needs her, and being there for her crew, even if it's something you can tell she really doesn't want to do, but also because it we got a bit of her own human side finally after all this time with her relationship with her husband and how she had put a priority on that and making sure she had the time. But when it was like, well, the crew needs me, and she was getting ready to sacrifice her personal time. But it also showed, because you had Stevens, who shows how much she's respected by her crew. He actually months in advance planned everything because he knew what would happen because of how Captain Freeman is. And I think it really was one of these episodes that you truly get a respect and understand how great Freeman is in her own right as captain of the Cerritos.
That's a good point. Amy, did you want to respond to that?
I just wanted to say thank you for saying that, because I feel the same way. So thank you.
Yeah, that it's the Freeman story was my personal favorite too, just because of her corralling her fellow upper deckers and having to deal with the main threat of the ship and realizing that this species, hates compliments. But I felt she hit it out of the park from when she first began the meeting with the upper deckers. She's like, what she de-evolved? She evolved? What was happening again? Kind of stuff that you wish other captains would say, it's like, seen this before, it's, just, I thought it was kind of nonchalant. And I also like the fact that she, ended it with everyone like kind of like doing a high five. I honestly, I love that shot too, of the camera shot looking down at the conference table, and they're all kind of looking up and stuff. But I really enjoyed her. But I got to give a shout out though to our chief engineer Billups. I really like the side story. I thought he's great, and I'm also a big fan of Paul Scheer. If you don't know who he is, he's done a lot of comedic stuff in the past, and he's doing obviously a lot of voiceovers. But this is a funny guy. He's a stand-up comedian. He's getting a lot of work now, of course, doing voiceover and stuff. But I love the kind of character that he brings to Billups in his voice acting as well. And I don't know what it was exactly, but this, working with his as you mentioned, we do get to see other lower deckers that they work with that aren't the star lower deckers, and I really like that kind of engineering thing, and the whole thing about dying into two. But that was so funny. That's great. So yeah. All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and let's wrap things up here. Wanted to kind of get your guys' final thoughts here on episode 8 of Upper Decks, called Upper Decks. Excuse me. Look, going back and forth here. Episode 8 of Lower Decks, called Upper Decks. So, no ready room, of course, guys. Hopefully, maybe we'll get one towards the end. I don't know. We'll see. But I want to get your final thoughts on this episode. Amy, let's start with you.
Yeah. Oh, man. I'm really enjoying this season so far. There were only those 2 stinkers, but gosh, the others have been so fun. The constant callbacks. I'm still loving how often they are, how funny they are. That we still, that's why I love Lower Decks. And I was thinking about it actually earlier today, like Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks, those are my two favorite of this new era of Trek. I mean, and I love Discovery, but overall, Lower Decks, there's something about it, the humor, and seriously, it's all those callbacks. Yeah, the next phase, like all the time, just hilarious. And the characters. The stories are whatever. I'm not really about the stories, but these characters, I am loving now the Upper Decks because we got to know them. And what Kyle said about our Captain Freeman is exactly spot on. She was willing to give up her time. And thankfully, she's got someone there. Nope. And arranged to have her husband. And because that's the kind of captain. And you saw the response of her crewmates was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you came." And like they're going to do better because of her. Like that's leadership style. Oh my gosh, that's the theme. And to Anna, that's a leader is self-reflective, right? And with Ransom, a leader is inspiring others to get the work done. Like each of
Rather the Upper
them.
Decks.
Yes, like they have given us all master classes on leadership. So this is a really good episode. Yeah.
That's a good point. Kyle, your final thoughts on this episode?
It was a very fun episode. Like I agree with what everything Amy said. I just, like I said, I just wish we had 2 or 3 episodes earlier in the season. It was just one of those episodes. I feel like because we only got a couple left, and we still have some big stuff to deal with. Deal with that. Let's have this episode. We could have replaced one of those episodes earlier in the season and had this episode and done something more to expand on what was going to hopefully be a fantastic finale for Lower Decks. But I love seeing the Upper Deckers. I love seeing everybody get their chance to shine. They deserved it. They've earned it. The voice acting talent has earned their moment and to shine on an episode as well. And they all did a phenomenal job. It's a great episode, and I'm glad that they did decide to do an episode like this. Either way, no matter what I feel about where it falls within the season, either way, everybody deserved those episodes. Those characters deserve this moment. Those voice actors deserve that moment. And it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad they did it.
I enjoyed this episode more on a rewatch. When I first watched it, I was kind of like, But I did start to appreciate a little bit more and paying a little more attention, especially to the Easter eggs and the shout outs. That's one of the best things about this series, guys. And I feel like what I love about it too is that you could tell it's done out of love and respect for the whole Star Trek franchise, and that they get it. And I love the fact that our characters get it. Whether our Lower Deckers are mentioning other stuff that's happened in past episodes of Star Trek, and you're like, oh yeah, So and there's some stuff that's just like you really got to dive deep. You really got to pay attention to that little offhanded comment that someone just said about something. You're like, oh wait, that sounds familiar. So yeah. But what's interesting here, guys, and I'm kind of like I'm a little sad here because we only have 2 more episodes. The next episode is called is it Fishu Quest? Fishu, Fissue.
Fisher. I think it's Fisher Quest. Because they've been dealing with fishers.
Oh, okay, that's true. We still have that to look into. And then the last episode's called The New Next Generation. So we will find out more, guys. So yeah, here we go. This is, of course, season 5, Star Trek Lower Decks, the final season. And of course, this is the episode 8 Upper Decks. Guys, I wanted to, first of all, let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Amy, what's happening over on the BQ end? And tell us how we can get a hold of you too.
One show I want to give a shout out to is our Trexperts quiz. They're back again and having so much fun answering questions. Really a good time over there. They're on YouTube, also as a podcast if you want to listen. So yes, check us out over there. You can find me on Blue Sky at BQN Podcasts. I am also in our Facebook group, and we've got a Discord server, so you can find me there. I'm Amy Nelson.
Awesome. Kyle, where can we find you on the Fandom Podcast Network?
You can find me all over the Fandom Podcast Network. We've got so much fun going on besides what's happening here at the Union Federation. got some great couch potato theaters coming up. We're been covering Skeleton Crew on Culture Clash, the new Star Wars show. We got so many fun things going on. And of course, if you want to find me on my personal social media, you can find me on X at AKyleW. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at AKyleFandom. You can find me on Blue Sky now at AKyleW. And of course, you can find me on all of our wonderful Facebook groups for the Fandom Podcast Network.
Yeah, but Fandom Podcast Network is now on Blue Sky, so make sure you check us out. We're at FanPod Network. And Union Federation, of course, you can, of course, join our Facebook group. Please do. And you can also find us on Instagram and also on X. You can also email us at unionfederation@gmail.com. And also, please check out Union Federation. If you're not watching it, please join our YouTube channel, Fandom Podcast Network. That's where we drop all of our episodes, including these Union Federation one. And of course, you can find me on X, Instagram, Threads, Discord, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky at Spartan Phoenix. So make sure you find that out there. So guys, thank you so much. And by the way, just a quick shout out too, if you haven't already, please join our TeePublic Fund here. You can find our Union Federation shirts and of course all of our shirts on TeePublic. Just search Fandom Podcast Network. Get a little kickback when you guys support us there. So yeah, make sure you check that out. Amy, as always, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Kyle,
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Always a pleasure.
Much. And until next week, guys, live long and prosper. And without a doubt, this is the weirdest ship in the fleet. We'll see you guys next time.